In addition to all the other accomplishments and accolades that we've already talked about, she is a generous and encouraging supporter of the tennis media next gen, as it were. And as we just saw, she is the owner of a Wimble Roof. Mary Carillo, thank you for joining us on Tennis Tuesday.
I am honored to be here. Love the graphics on your show. Love them. The first time I saw that was when you were doing your show out of Indian Wells. And yeah, you were holding up homemade graphics. It was outstanding. You guys, yes. You're both okay? You're doing all right?
You know what we've loved, Mary? We've loved, there are some silver linings to be drawn out of all the tough stuff that is happening in our world right now. But we have loved watching network TV use Tennis Tuesday graphics because it's happened out there. It has.
Copied you.
That's exactly right. And as I said, I mentioned that you have been so great to us and so encouraging to us. That brings me back to last year at Indian Wells when Nick and I first started doing this. And I am literally walking in to the complex, to the Indian Wells Tennis Garden. I'm on my phone. I've told Mary this, ordering dry shampoo. And who but Mary Carillo pops into my line of sight and says, Blair, I just got to say, I love what you and Nick are doing. And that is the first time we ever met. And it was great. And we so appreciate that.
I meant it. I'd never met you before, but I saw you. I recognized you. And yeah, I had to tell you, this stuff's important. And it's fun and it's entertaining and informative. And you two do a terrific job. I'm glad
we appreciate it. And this it's been a strange year for all of us, but maybe most of all for you, because you started the year not in Australia as you normally would have been, awaiting the arrival of grandchild baby Rhea, who is absolutely adorable. But then the season never really got going after that. What are you missing most about the sport right now?
Oh, you know what? You're right, Blair, because what happened was I was going to owe Tennis Channel a lot of work. And I knew it was going to be a very busy season because I skipped 2 weeks of the Australian Open for them. And then I thought I was going to be at the Olympics with Nick in Tokyo this summer. That would have been a month. And so they had already scheduled me to do Eastbourne, right before Wimbledon, out of the LA studio, and then go right to Wimbledon for 2 weeks. And then I had to miss the Canadian Open. So I had to push it off on the back end. So I went from that thinking, how am I gonna pull this off, to what we've got now. So I am very lucky that I'm a grandmother, that happened towards the first week, the end of the first week of the Australian Open. I'm so lucky that my daughter and her husband and baby Rhea live down here, because it has been my absolute pleasure and salvation to be around this beautiful young life. I think I've sent you guys about 457 photos of my child, my grandchild.
Keep them coming.
So yeah, no, that's lovely, And the weird part about living in Florida, I've talked to Chris Everett, who lives down here, Martina, who lives down here. When you get a hurricane down here, and you're from Florida, Blair, you know this, you got no power, you got no internet, you got no air conditioning, it's beautiful where we are. It's beautiful down here. The Gulf of Mexico is a couple of blocks away from me, so it all feels like it's fine out there. And then I put my mask on and go buy groceries. Strange times.
It really is. I mean, and I feel it here in Montana, which probably feels worlds away from Florida and from Texas, but it's a similar feeling here. Mary, I like that you mentioned Tokyo, because we were meant to go and be there for the summer. What's been the strangest part of all of this? I mean, you've worked in sports for so long. We've never seen a pandemic like this in modern sports. We've never seen a break from the tennis tour, and then the Olympics gets delayed. But from your point of view, what's been the strangest part of this whole thing?
I mean, every bit of it's been strange. And what's had to happen is that, I think everybody would have wanted, all the tournament directors and Tokyo, they would have wanted to be able to wait longer than they did, but they had to declare their decisions earlier than they wanted to. And I was on a call with, it was me and 169 other announcers for NBC for the Tokyo Games. And this was before they had called it off. And basically it was a conference call just saying, nothing's been called off yet. but it's very fluid. And I'm thinking to myself, what the, and like 3 days later, it got called off. So it's, and it's interesting, because I've done some work in recent weeks at Tennis Channel, be back again next week. We're doing a salute to the Australian, which I've missed in this year. But so the night before we were going to go on, Lindsay Davenport texted me and said, do you think we're going to see any tennis in 2020? Now here's Lindsay, who I love. She's got 4 kids. They've got season tickets to USC football. They go to all the hockey games. Their kids are I said to her, are you going to be comfortable taking your kids to a college football game this fall? And she's like, hell no. Like I said, well, there. Yeah. You know what I mean? I won't feel safe that way. My son lives in New York, and he's an actor, and he hasn't been there for about almost 40 days now. And he's been told, try to stay out of there, till like July. So the fact that everything has frozen, everything has stopped. And sports, I think, it's going to be a very hard thing this year right now. It'll be interesting. I mean, do you guys like the idea of watching sporting events without fans?
I think people would take it if they could have it broadcast into their home right now. I certainly would love to see even the camera people put back to work. I think that would be nice for even some segments of sort of that tennis workforce. But I've talked to some people in broadcast, and even then, just to have kind of that broadcast product and what you miss out on in sponsors on the ground, I don't even know if that's financially feasible.
Right. Well, that becomes a question too. I mean, the big sports make their money from TV rights and sponsorship, and then everything, the tickets and sales at the games. And so something like the NFL, which is trying to go on without fans this fall, from everything I listen to, that business model works for the big sports. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that tennis can really pull that. Really don't think so. And really, if you wanted to hold, say, the U.S. Open, you can't sell grounds passes, right? So that's gone. And you can't, if you have a food court, that's dangerous. And if you have a small food court, that's even more dangerous. Because more, you got to have bathrooms. So, all right, you got to keep some bathrooms attendants around, and but you don't want too many of them either. And then what do you sell every 4th seat? Do you stagger? I mean, everything is up in the air, it seems. But I'd be a little surprised if the U.S. Open happened. I'd be a little surprised if the French Open happened. I don't know. I'm not that optimistic.
Yeah, no, we've been discussing it, Mary.
By nature, Nick, as you know.
I know you are. We've been discussing this the last couple episodes of just, first Blair and I were giving like weekly updates of the schedule's now this, and tennis fans are so informed as far as how things are happening, and now it's looking very tough for the USTA to put the US Open on. The other thing, Mary, that's been making a lot of headlines is that one tweet by Roger Federer, which just kind of blew up the tennis world. And obviously Blair and I have been talking a lot about it this week.
What have you guys been saying about it? And then I'll chime in.
Well, we've been kind of towing the party lines. I would love to see the tours come together. I would love to see more unity in tennis. I know, though, and Blair knows this too, there's a lot to work through for these two tours to come together. A lot.
Right. I actually found Roger's tweet. It came up as, and I love Roger, but that seemed like such a disingenuous tweet. Is there anyone else that thinks it might, like, really, Raj? This is you're just throwing it out there. I do know that the WTA have been in talks. I do know that Steve Simon, the WTA guy, has been talking to the new guy, Gaudenzi, at the ATP. And if nothing else comes out of this, it sounds like finally the WTA is going to get rid of the way they designate their tournaments. The premiers, the premier mandatories, non-premier, but it's a really nice tournament. All those designations drove me nuts. I always got it wrong too. I always and I would have the copy right in front of me, and it's premier met. No, it's not. Oh, okay, well, whatever. It's important. There's a lot of good people here. Yeah. So they're going to adopt the men's This is worth 1,000 points. This is a 500 tournament. This is a 250. So that's going to be happening. So at least there's something coherent about the two tours. And I'm glad to hear that. And it sounds like the talks have been earnest and respectful, but these are going to be turf wars any way you look at it.
Mary, you, I think, can give us an idea of the historical perspective as far as this goes. We saw you in your little video wearing your BJK shirt, which I too have one of those. You obviously know Billie Jean King well. She was the first person to kind of, if we're talking about floating this idea, she did more than float it. She really went hard, and it didn't happen in the 70s. So how big would it be for this to happen now?
Blair, not only did she float, before she floated the idea, I think she assumed it. The sport turns pro in 68, and she just assumed, all right, the men and the women are going to be together. And then as she reacted to Roger Federer's tweet and said, this is something I've wanted since the early 70s. The fact is, the men, and we're talking about men I really admire and respect, Arthur Ashe, Stan Smith, Billie said, why don't we join forces? And they said, no, we don't need you, basically. I mean, Billie was when the guys, they boycotted Wimbledon because Nikki Pilic didn't want to play Davis Cup for his country. And those guys didn't even like Nikki Pilic that much. But the solidarity, they said, we're boycotting Wimbledon. And Billie said, well, we'll boycott it too. The women will. And they said, no, you don't have to. You go ahead, go play on. I mean, yeah, of course it would be great. But I mean, this sport has been cobbled together year by year, piece by piece. And there's all kinds of silos. You guys know this as much as I do. There's all kinds of turf wars. It's like I picture, and there's 7 different entities, as you guys know, with the majors and the WTA, the ITF, the ATP. It's sort of like in The Godfather, the 5 families, like the 5 families, Nobody wants to give up, I don't know how much this is a film that's very important to the Carillo family. You got your Catalias, you got your Barzinis, you got your Strachis and your Cuneos, and they all want a piece of the pie, whether it's racketeering or loan sharking or prostitution, whatever. Like everybody wants their piece. So the idea of showing up in some smoke-filled room, the 7 families of tennis and coming together. Am I over dramatizing what I feel this is going to look like, or are we all on the same? I would love to write the screenplay to this.
I mean,
everyone's going to have to go to the mattresses, No, I mean, look, theoretically, it's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful idea. And then you need your consiglieres, you need people who can actually make it all work and pull people apart. And for something like this to work, tearing up the calendar, starting all over, and they were going to have to spend all kinds of effort. And then if they all walk away having compromised, if they all walk away dissatisfied, then we'll have a good tour. If everybody walks away aggravated, that's our only chance.
Okay, so Blair, I know that Blair wants to ask you on another hot topic. Before we move on from this, the thing that we asked our fans, we call it our Your Serve segment, is what would you name said tour? And what would be the first issue, the #1 issue you think these 2 tours would have to figure out?
The name, I would probably name it Mongolio, just because, that's how I am. No, I would, no, you don't like that name? No, what would I name it? I'd have to think about what kind of, obviously it's got to be equal. And I'm not just talking about equal, the WTA has to stand strong. They've got to really, throw their elbows around and make sure that there's equal prize money, that it's consistently equal long term, not just short term, not just because Serena's still playing. And, they have to make sure that the TV rights are equitable, that the show courts, the women get the show courts the same way the guys do. I mean, there's so many things that that's my biggest concern, is that I think the ATP, there's a lot of savvy business people who've been there a long time and have been around and, have given, I think, more hip checks in the past than the WTA has, and fought for things. And unfair me, but I tend to think that the WTA is a little bit too, something happens and then they say, well, we want a big Davis Cup type situation for Fed Cup, or we want, I really need them to be a very, very muscular, more than anything. Otherwise, I just don't know how much it's going to work. And we've known, look, you guys, we've all been around for a long time. There's been plenty of chauvinism in the past, plenty of, do you guys remember at Wimbledon before they finally knuckled under? It took the European majors, the French Open and Wimbledon, longer to come around than to the US Open, which was the first in Australia. But there was some guy at Wimbledon who said his excuse for not giving the women the equal prize money is because we need money for the petunias. Remember the petunia guy?
No.
Who was the petunia guy?
There was a guy who's saying, well, and hey, nobody loves a petunia like I love a petunia. But this guy's basically he was basically saying, no, is what he was saying. He blamed it on the petunias. So there's, and I have to ask you, Nick, because we both love figure skating. In figure skating, where there's men and women, and is everybody pretty much making the same kind of money and getting the same kind of what's the figure? There aren't that many truly co-ed sports, right, guys? But figs, I've always thought, figs is, the women and the men are right in line with one another. Or am I wrong?
I believe I'm correct in saying it's equal prize money. And there's a lot of argument that you could actually say the women are a bigger draw. You've got bigger stars. I mean, Yuzu Rohanyu has changed that within figure skating. Blair's getting more figure skating knowledge here on Tennis Tuesday. We were talking about it earlier. But Mary, the pairs, the ice dance team, singles, they do get, and that ISU prize money has gone down over the years. The sport doesn't have as big of a reach. But yes, the ISU does give equal prize money.
Yeah.
Which actually is a perfect segue for my next question for you, because Dominic Thiem, talk about ruffling feathers, decides to be very blunt about his feelings on lower ranked players getting a bigger chunk of the pie to an Austrian outlet. Mary, it made me wonder how much you won when you won your French Open mixed doubles title. And because
that was a hairpin turn. I thought you wanted to weigh in on Thiem.
Well, I do.
$800 winning the French Open mixed doubles in 1977. That's what you wanted to know?
Well, only because, and it's interesting, you mentioned the boycott in '73. I talked to Stan Smith, and I mentioned this earlier, but he pretty much said the players today don't really know how good they have it. And we don't know exactly what Thiem was reacting to, whether it was John Millman's tweet about more money for lower ranked players or the player relief fund that had him donating $30,000 to that cause. But he pretty much said, hey, nobody handed anything to me. Why should they get more money? How do you feel on this particular topic?
Well, do you want me to tell you my French Open story, or are we past my mixed doubles?
No, I would love that.
No, so very quickly. So John McEnroe, he's an amateur. He's there to play the French Open juniors and Wimbledon juniors. Then he ends up getting through qualies at Wimbledon a couple of weeks after the French Open, and gets all the way to the semis of the big event. But so we win the French, which was crazy. And he said, well, when you go to get your prize money, get mine too. Like, I know I'm an amateur, but take mine and then give me half. And I'm there like, why should I give you half? You're an amateur. I'm not giving you half. But as it turns out, when you go to get your prize money, they have your name, and they obviously, and I don't know if they still do it this way. Back in dinosaur ages, here's what you won in the singles, in the doubles, in the mix. So I only got my share, and we split, and he didn't get any of it. We split $1,600. Yeah, which I thought was great. We had pizza and beer that night. So we were all happy. But the Dominic Thiem thing, I really like him. I really like him. I really respect him. I know how hardworking he is. I mean, the guy is a beast. So clearly he was, I think the comment that struck me hardest was when he basically said, those guys are not in shape. They don't work hard. Like he was talking about like the guys ranked 700 or so, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, so his whole thing is, why should I hold them up, right? But he makes weird calls. I think like he wasn't going to the Olympics this year, Nick. He was going to play Gestalt instead, right? Or
Kitzbühel.
Like, so he's clearly, he won it last year. He's getting paid a fortune to show up again. And I love Austria. Well, if you really love it, I think you should represent Austria at the Olympics. Like, wait a minute, which one? What will they remember me for? Kitzbühel or a medal, an Olympic medal? So I thought it was, I think it took a lot of us by surprise, because what's surprising to me about Dominic Thiem always is he hits such a big, he's very physical in the way that Nadal is. And then he goes into a press conference and he whispers, he's got that very soft, gentle, right? It's like disconcerting that a guy that is that big. Look, and this is what's going to happen, in the locker room, if the men and the women do, the urge to merge isn't as strong with some people as others. That I'm going to guess that Dominic Thiem isn't crazy. I don't think he's surging to merge. Nick Kyrgios, obviously. There are going to be guys in that locker room who are just, they think about their own place and their own, their own career, and it's I don't know. It's going to be rough to see. And I keep waiting to see if Thiem is going to walk back that statement. And if you're not on your phone like all day long, you miss a lot. Maybe he already has. Who knows? Yeah. I haven't checked Twitter in 14 minutes. Oh, so that's kind of that. But that's what all we have is talk right now. Mm-hmm. So everyone's going to get in trouble. God knows I'm going to get in trouble. Just
the bad news.
You two.
And the bad news for us, Mary, is this is a taped show. We're taping this right now. It's coming out tomorrow morning, so this is all going to be moot. Listen, we've taken up too much of your time. Blair and I wanted to get one sort of broadcast piece in this interview, and I'm always curious. I love your behind-the-scenes segments that you do for NBC for the Olympics, and I'm just wondering if you can tease us with one of those. Maybe you've already shot it, maybe you're working on it right now, but what's one golden nugget that you've been working on for Tokyo 2021?
Yeah, now it's Tokyo 2021. I spent some time in Japan last year. I went to Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto. It was cherry blossom. That's why we wrapped it around. We wanted to be there for cherry blossom season, which was magnificent. And I became a samurai in Tokyo. I'm great. I learned how to be a samurai warrior. So that's worth a couple of laughs probably. And I also learned in Osaka, I learned the art of sumo. Yeah. So there was a moment, and it's not going to make the piece because it was too ridiculous. I mean, you two know me enough to know, like, I'll go sideways on something just thinking, oh, this might be funny. So there's this huge sumo wrestler I'm sitting next to. We're at the their training table. Huge. These are mammoth people. There's just I've never seen people like this. And if you like punch them, which they told me to do, like you get pushed back because it's tight. Anyway. So the captain of this sumo team sitting next to him, and he's scarfing down all kinds. There's stuff bubbling. It looks like Hogwarts, stuff bubbling everywhere, and rice. They're all eating. They eat like 4 times a day, and they just keep, This particular guy was probably about, I don't know, 375 and so very pleasantly, and we had my Japanese doesn't exist, his English. So I say to this guy, this huge guy, so, were you a big baby? Were you as a baby? Right? It's such a stupid question, right? So the translator looks at me like, what? I said, yeah, just ask him if he was, And so she asks him, And then he starts like barking back, and they're having a very long, complicated conversation between themselves. I've clearly insulted this guy, you know. And anyway, when it's all over, she looks at me and says, he says no. So I don't know. I thought it was a good question, you know, just kind of a warm up question, you know, but
I like the question. I personally would wonder if it correlates with size later.
Thank you, Blair. I thought it was journalism. It didn't translate, I guess. So anyway, I miss doing those stories. I miss I miss doing them. I hope everything's gonna happen next year. I don't know, man.
Well, we sure hope so. Mostly because we want to see this sumo story among other things. No, but I mean, you have just been somebody that we've been able to look at and learn from, which is something that we are so thankful for. You know, I wanted to ask one more question on that. Is there anything that you look back on your early pieces that you did, early interviews, or maybe early matches that you commentated and think, gosh, I'm glad I fine-tuned that? Or is there something that you kind of had to work out of your system that you can look back on now?
I think it's a very interesting question. Richard Deitch from the media, he follows sports media. And he just emailed me the other day and said that he's asking a bunch of people, if there's one moment you could take back and do over again, what would it be? Which is a very cool question. My answer was not nearly as good as his question, but you think about that a lot. And what I was taught, I sat next to Pat Summerall, CBS, with Tony Trabert for many years. We got to call a lot of U.S. Opens, and he was such a minimalist. And you know, a lot of producers I've worked with, they say, like, at the big moment or a match point, stamp your, go big and explain. And my inclination, because I sat next to Pat Summerall for so long, is you don't say anything. You just have a great director who cuts cameras and captures that moment. You don't have to explain, oh, the match is over, right? So okay, it's a visual medium. But I explained to that place that there was something I would take back. My first ever Olympics, you'll appreciate this, Nick, because you've been in a lot of those mix zones. So after an event, the host nation, Blair, gets, you know this too, the host nation gets the first couple of questions, and then whoever the athlete is, whatever the country that comes from, you get them next, and then they go down the line. So in Albertville Olympics, Winter Olympics, there was a terrific downhill racer named Hillary Lind, and she raced this big, bold race, and she won silver. And it was a big, so anyway, I'm at the bottom of the hill, and I've been told I get two questions. And there was some guy from MTV Sports who has changed my career. Have you ever heard of MTV Sports? No, because it lasted for about one afternoon with this like stoner dude. Stoner boy is at the bottom. He gets only one question. And it's not, it looked like perhaps he'd been smoking. So, anyway, and I'm all hype, over prepared, like you two always are. Like I know just what I want. I got two questions. So I do my questions, and then Stoner boy's chance. He gets one shot at it. Stoner boy, and Hillary's so happy she's going to talk to anybody. And he says, so Hillary, what do you think the downhill would be like if there was like no gravity? Great question. So Hillary, God bless her, like looks at him, and he's just going like this, and she looks back at him, and she gives it a think, and she says, well, I guess I'd just float away. And she like went with it, and Stoner boy is just here like, God, I crushed.
Oh.
And I looked at him, I didn't ask that question. Like, how did I not ask this? So that is the one thing, looking back, I would probably do over again. Is like, ask questions like that. You do what you can. I'm an old woman. I'm a grandmother now. No regrets. Just keep trying to push forward.
Well, Mary, it's okay. You've made it through that Albertville moment. And listen, if we don't get to see the baby sumo moment, we know that you've got a new special baby in your life. So congrats on that. And thanks for hanging out with us on Tennis Tuesday.
Thanks, Mary.
Anytime, you two, really, anytime.